Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on navigating menopause at work. This is the first part in a series of webinars, the second of which will be on November 1st. I am Francesca DiMeglio, the editor of HR Exchange Network, and I'd like to introduce you to our esteemed guest, Christine Muldoon, SVP, Marketing and Strategy at WebMD Health Services, and Jyoti Sharma, founder, CEO, CTO of Tara Cares. Before I turn it over to Christine, I must do a bit of housekeeping. First, we're delighted to have such a great audience, and we want you to be very much involved in the discussion we're having. You're welcome to use the live chat to get to know one another, and you can also use it to alert us of any tech problems you may be having. You can also share with each other about where you are, and if you want to share LinkedIn, that's a great way to know each other as well. You can send questions through the Q&A too that you see across the bottom of your screen. Keep the questions coming throughout the discussion. There will be time for Q&A at the end of the talk or even during the talk, depending on our speakers. Also, you can click on the resources button at the bottom of your screen for a link to some relevant content provided by our speakers. And remember, those of you participating in today's live session qualify for SHRM credits. After the event, be on the lookout in your email box for those. Before I turn it over to you, I just want to welcome both of you and wish you a great webinar.
Thank you, Francesca. I would like to welcome everyone to part one of Menopause in the Workplace webinar series. My name is Christine Muldoon, and I am excited to have a great conversation with Jyoti Sharma today on this important topic. Menopause in the workplace is a global issue, and I am seeing so many of you on the screen here. We have a great audience today. And since we know it's a global issue, would love for you all to use the chat function and just share where you are joining from. I'm joining from my home office in Ridgefield, Connecticut in the US. Jyoti, because I know you are a world traveler, where are you joining from today?
I'm joining from London, Christine, and hi, everyone.
Oh, awesome. Look at where everyone is coming from. This is awesome. As a global well-being solutions company, WebMD Health Services is seeing many organizations focusing on the special needs of women and their health. And I would say that most common have been solutions focused on things like family planning, pre and post pregnancy, as well as obviously, thanks to COVID, more and more focus on caregiving as well. But as we look ahead to 2024, there is certainly a lot of talk about supporting the full range of women's health. And in fact, there was a survey report that was done by Mercer, the Health and Benefits Strategies for 2024 survey. And that report found that the percentage of employers planning to offer menopause support has more than tripled since last year's survey, more than tripled. So that is amazing. And today we are going to start a real conversation about menopause in the workplace because it is important. And the thing I want you to remember today is that menopause is not just a gender or a race issue, it is an organizational issue. So to kick us off, we would love to understand your reason for joining the webinar today on menopause in the workplace. We're going to do a quick poll, and if we can kick that off, and if not, okay, no big deal. I'm going to read the question. You all did such an amazing job with the chat. Hi, someone's from Connecticut. Hi. We're going to use the chat. So first question for you all is, why did you join today's webinar regarding menopause in the workplace? So if you want to share, maybe it's because you are personally going through menopause. Is it because maybe you want to learn more to support, maybe it's a family member or a friend that's going through menopause? It is quite possible you are a people manager. So you're in a leadership role. Maybe you want to learn more in terms of how you could support employees. I'm seeing this going through menopause. Great. Maybe you want to understand the impact that menopause has within an organization so that you can make the case for menopause solutions and services and support within your organization. Maybe there's another reason. I love to see so many of you indicating that you're going through menopause. We're going to have this conversation. It is fantastic. Also to support across the workplace globally, which is really, really important as well. Fantastic. Okay, second question for everyone. What is the status of menopause support in your company? There are organizations that probably have great resources, training, support. Maybe your organization is in the early stages, maybe basic in terms of benefits. I see some of you saying none. We've got nothing. It's taboo. We don't talk about it in the workplace. Maybe I see some of you aren't sure. And that's like equally as important as having none, right? I don't know what is being offered. That means you're not talking about it either. None. Oh my goodness. Well, we are going to prepare you all today. So Jyoti, I hope you're seeing this chat going through.
I am.
A lot of opportunity. So the other thing I will say is this is a conversation. I am so excited to have Jyoti share her perspective, her research, a lot of what she has done already on this topic of menopause in the workplace. We will ask questions throughout the conversation today, so feel free to use the Q&A. Put a question there and I'll check that every so often just to make sure, and we'll ask those questions as we go through this. So the good news here, Jyoti, is that so many people are joining all over the world for so many reasons, and they have goals as well. And so we have a lot to cover. So I'm going to just turn it over to you to jump right in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christine. I was just looking at the chat and we have around 222 parts, 223. It's increasing by the second. So thank you so much for such a fantastic introduction and, setting the context. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, joining us from. Thank you for joining us today. A huge thank you to Christine, Carson, and the WebMD Limeade team, as well as the HR Exchange Network for bringing this all together. I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. I think on the chat, when I was looking at it, it's ranging from people going through that experience themselves, integrating it into the workplace, clinical care support, some organizations looking at introducing pelvic support offerings. So these are all things that we are going to cover during the session, and please do ask questions. Very quickly, in terms of declaring any conflicts of interest. So I have all information being shared is confidential with rights reserved to Tara Cares. That's the company that I'm the founder and CEO for. Any external research literature has been respectfully referenced within the presentation, and you will have access to the materials, the recording of the session. All right, so the topic for the day, and let me just quickly minimize ourselves here. The topic of the day is navigating menopause in the workplace, a deep dive into its impact on work and life. I would like to ask a quick question on chat again. How many people who've joined us today know what menopause and perimenopause is? Just say with a yes or a no. Just looking at the chat here.
Lots of yeses.
Lots of yeses. That is good. That is good. But let's level set. So menopause, if it is not natural or age-related, is when you are at the point of not having a period for 12 consecutive months. And I know some women may have a question that if they're using any contraceptive methods and they're not having their periods, so how do you understand that? Now, it is generally a transition of 7 to 10 years, but there can be individual differences. So as we go through this session, I really want you to keep this term front and center, individual differences. And it's this transition period that's called perimenopause, peri as in Latin, perimeter, meaning around. And the individual differences are what lead to the variability in the experience from one woman or a female individual to another. As HR leaders, looking to create healthy and inclusive workplaces, it's also important to note that some transgender men, non-binary people, and intersex people or people with variations in sex characteristics may also experience menopause. Now, I founded Tara Cares to introduce science into how we understand, diagnose, and manage menopause. My intent and objective to this session is to make it real by sharing lived experience from the research that we have been doing sharing research, high quality research that has been done already, as well as integrate my 22 years corporate and management consulting experience to offer actionable steps that you can take. And the key message I want to leave with you today, if you forget everything else, is that no woman wants to be called menopausal. All right, with that, let's just get started. So setting the context, we'll first go through where it all started and the cultural differences that are there, which actually continue to inform our perspectives and also responsible for the stigma, suffering, and silence of the topic that we are covering today. In the 1820s, there was a French physician, Charles Pierre-Louis de Gardin, who coined the term menopause. Meno as in coming from menses, which means monthly, and pause means stopping. Now, in the Victorian era, women were considered inferior to men, and their value was based only on their fertile life cycle. Now, I think we're sitting in the 21st century. I don't think we've made much progress in that regard. From a cultural perspective, however, if you see in the Japanese culture, the word for menopause is konenki, which means renewal, season, and energy. It's also referred to as second spring. And in the classical texts of Ayurveda, in Hinduism, we do not refer to menopause as a disorder or an indication of pathology. It is just a natural transition. And if we just talk about natural and age-related menopause, though there are other types which we will also, get information on during this session, then it is a natural developmental stage, and it's the wisdom and the experience of the woman that needs to be valued. However, now with advancements in science, we've come to understand the workings of the endocrine system. We've also come to understand that these three sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, they form that protective core within a woman's body. And essentially, the best way to remember it is brain, health, and bones. These are the three key areas of your body that are affected or impacted by, depending on what kind of menopause you are going through. Let me just quickly pause there because I'm not looking at chat while I'm speaking. So let me see, Christine, if you had any questions, or I can just keep going.
No, you're good. You can keep going.
Okay, fantastic. Now, covering some more research data that's there. Among the top countries, so US is among the top countries that are contributing to this research, followed by the UK, Italy, and France. Now, I did see, when I looked at chat, I did see a few of the folks that have dialed in from the UK. And I think if you've been in the circles or on social media, there are lots of insights that are coming from the UK, not from the US. I mean, there are, but there's a whole menopause revolution happening in the UK at the moment. Now, what's important to note is that these 10 countries, of course, when they're doing research, they are looking at the existing literature review. They're looking at both quantitative and qualitative studies. Now, here's a slight problem. If, let's say, someone's reading at research and say, oh, this is what this particular paper says. Now, researchers like me know that there are varying thresholds of the quality of research. To give you an example, there are certain psychological scales that are used in doing this research, like the Green Climacteric Scale, which actually in the UK, the National Health Service still uses that scale to diagnose women and to assess your menopause symptoms. That scale was built in 1976. That's the problem we've got at our hands. There's a menopause quality of life index, which was built in 1996. Menopause rating scale in 1990s, all developed decades ago when our understanding of the menopause transition was not as scientific as it is today. And even today, a lot of work still needs to be done. So it's important that when the researchers are doing this research, they're using the latest innovations, they are covering the relevant menopause transition symptoms, and it's very comprehensive. So let me just see if we have any questions, or Christine, if you had a question, or I'll keep going.
Keep going. There's
Cool.
questions, but I know we're going to answer them. So
okay, awesome. Now, when we are doing a systematic review, now what the next slide is showing you is the number of keywords that people who were curious about menopause used during their research. Now, when we are doing research, we build what is known as a research protocol, and there were 42 keywords that were used with a higher frequency, and that included mainly MHT, menopause hormonal therapy, as it's called in the US, or HRT, hormone replacement therapy, as it's called in the UK and some other countries. It also included research on hormones such as estrogen or estradiol, menopause-linked symptoms such as hot flashes or hot flushes. That's one question that I often get asked. What is the difference between hot flashes and hot flushes? Purely cultural. In the US, it's called flashes. In the UK, it's called flushes. People also searched on osteoporosis, cardiovascular disorders. So what this is telling you is how complex the entire landscape of menopause is, how complex are the angles and the dimensions that people who are wanting to understand or what they're going through want to understand about it. And here, let me bring back in the term individual differences. The variability of that experience is because of these individual differences. Now, what are these? Now, these include your medical and family history, your socioeconomic determinants of health, your educational background, your ethnicity, your genetic constitution, as well as your lifestyle factors. At TheraCares, we've analyzed large studies, including the SWAN study, which is still one of the largest healthy aging studies. And we have concluded with 29 determinants of menopause health that is built in our platform. And that's another thing that we are day and night trying to achieve, is change and transform this narrative from being just symptomatic to being positive and indicating the healthy aging aspect on the entire life spectrum of a particular lady. Let me quickly ask a question on chat. How many people know that the age at which a woman may start her transition to menopause or perimenopause differs based on what your ethnicity or your country of origin is? Let's see if you get, just say you know it or you don't know it, say a yes or a no.
A lot of no's.
Yeah, not surprised. So to give you just a prime example, I'm a woman of Indian origin, and mostly for South Asian women, based on current research evidence, the average age for menopause is 45, while the average age for menopause for other ethnicities and Caucasian women is 51. That does not mean that all South Asian women stop their periods at 44 or 45. But what that does mean is that your body is starting to enter that transition or perimenopause at a much earlier age. So if we look at the current urban lifestyle that we have, I think a lot of us, when we were at 35, 36 is when, women are actually thinking of having their first child. And I've spent 4,000 hours and growing, speaking to women, interviewing women in 13 countries. And there were so many of them who, when they went to the doctor to understand and say that they were planning a family, they were given the devastating news that they had what is known as early menopause, or premature ovarian insufficiency. Now, if that woman had known maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, because the science is there, that would have been, she would have had more options, to make those decisions. So we want to make sure that the right education is available to people at the right time in order to, make those decisions. So what's the scale of the problem? The scale of the problem is that just these 3 top countries, in the US, we have an estimated 6,000 women who are entering perimenopause daily or reaching menopause, and about more than 2 million women yearly who reach menopause. In the UK, currently, we have around 15 million women who are in varying stages of menopause transition. And in India, there are currently 100 million women in menopause transition. This is a public health challenge, and organizations and excellent HR leaders who are attending this session, we all have a role to play. We have a responsibility on our shoulders for healthier workforces and to offer timely science-backed information. That's important, because in this world of social media where everybody just wants to talk, with not a lot of evidence in their hands. It's very difficult to discern the fake news from genuine news. So it's important that when you're looking at your resources, you are actually making sure that they are science-backed.
Jyoti,
all right.
Can
Yes.
I interrupt you for a quick second?
Go for it.
I have to ask you this because we know menopause is a universal experience, but going back to that graph that you showed with the research,
This one?
the one before this, the US was leading in menopause research. Now I have to tell you, in prep for this webinar, despite me being perimenopause, you would think I would know all of this, but I did a lot of research and I saw that most of the research, the content, the information was really coming from the UK. Are they more progressive there? Like what is the factor? Why is that?
Yeah, it actually became quite evident to me as well. And I've lived in the States for 15 years, but of course at that time I was not in my 40s. But recently when I went to Connecticut, Christine, there were American women who were quite inhibited in talking about their experience. Now, in the UK, I couldn't tell you what the key reason is, but maybe in the UK, it's a more diverse population. We have a huge, lots of movement happening within the parliament as well. The healthcare providers are also raising their voice. Within the UK, around I think we have a slide where we show around 600 employers have actually signed the menopause pledge. Bank of Ireland has issued a menopause leave. So I think, and also UK is 4 nations, right? Remember, it's not one country. So it's England and Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and all different cultures. So we also see that there are lots of people like me who are not from academia and now from corporate, now entering into the research world, and we come with a very different focus on bringing this knowledge into people's hands. So there's a lot of technological innovation that's happening within the UK. So I think it's all about bringing the research out of the ivory towers. And as I say, if you win in one country, it sets a precedence for women in other countries. But yeah, this was a very interesting data point. I mean, there are now sessions and seminars and webinars like this that are happening in the US. But the fact of the matter still is that the vocally sharing that experience is so important because it gives strength to other women. It is such an intimate experience. And when I'm interviewing women, I really hats off to all our research participants because every single woman who participated in our research said they're doing it for other women so that they can utilize the power and the results and findings of the research, in their own experience. So hopefully that answers the question. Yeah.
When we talked about this in preparation, you used the term, it's a culturally volatile topic. And that really resonated because if you think about it, there are so many cultural influences on the perception of menopause, the experiences that women go through, and management of menopause. And I found this so interesting. You talked a little bit about this at the beginning, that menopause is really a rite of passage for some cultures, and for others, symptoms are based on like your diet, and you may not experience certain things. And then culturally, women are respecting their elders, and they're respected, and that makes the transition easier too. And it's just like, well, I know many of you are chiming in about the US, and we don't talk about it as much here, but we're changing that right now.
We're changing that. Yeah, there's a lot of good conversation happening on that. And it is culturally volatile. I mean, in the UK, there is this term that they just get on with it. And often it's your mom who says, just get on with it, because she said, oh, we didn't have a problem. And then these women I interviewed, they went back to their mothers and said, no, you did have a problem. We were suffering as a result of it. You just didn't realize that you were going through it, right?
Okay.
And so it's important every woman is at any point, and this is important for HR leaders to understand, when you create that culture of talking and create that culture of exchanging and supporting with the right information, even then there are so much cultural conditioning, so much family conditioning. These are all internal barriers that women are crossing. I mean, I can tell you, I am the founder of the startup that's leading the charge on this. I'm of Indian origin. I wasn't raised talking about my reproductive parts in public, right? So even in my early stages of setting up the startup, and I was talking about, ovaries and just even using the scientific terms, I was crossing barriers within, because I knew, no, someone has to talk about it and it has to be me. Or even saying, like, any session, I'm 43 years old. So whether I like it or not, my body is in menopause transition. And, it's whether it's fear, whether it's, oh, I'm going to be called old and ageist narrative, it will take some time to go away. But the example, I think, through these events, what we want to leave is women in their 20s and 30s shouldn't have a problem, or even in their adolescent years, should be proud that, hey, you lived this long and you actually had the opportunity and the challenges to create that experience for yourselves. Let me just see quickly.
There's so much chat going on here. Well, there was a question, Judy, is 7 to 10 years accurate for all women going through menopause?
So great question. So if you have natural age-related menopause, normally the average is 7 to 10 years. Now, it also depends what your individual circumstances are, where your the symptoms that you have, if they are debilitating, that may actually extend beyond that time. The other point to note there is, which we'll see in a couple of slides, is there's also early menopause and premature ovarian insufficiency, or if someone's going through cancer therapy, or you had any surgeries done, then often it's not a transition. So which means, let's say if someone's going through a cancer therapy at 28, right? That lady will almost plunge overnight into medically induced menopause, which means that from 28 onwards until she reaches like 45, 50, she will be going through that experience, which probably will be worse than most other natural age-related women. So again, it's variable. So hopefully that answers the question. Just give us a thumbs up. I can't see the chat, but hopefully it answers the question.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So let's progress. So the next topic, so we've set the context, we've talked about the historical context, and thank you for all the engagement and the questions, and Christine for your interventions as well. So the first topic now we get into is, what is the importance of measuring your menopause-linked presenteeism and absenteeism? Now, when I'm talking to a lot of companies, most of them say, yeah, sure, we've got a benefit, or we've got an app and that gives people some materials to read, and that's about it. We wash our hands off it. That's where most companies are. They call themselves quote unquote menopause-friendly, which I think something is better than nothing. So it's a good start to have. But there is an economic driver for this. So to give you some numbers, the National Health Service, which is the public healthcare system in the UK, they did a study in 2022. And they are one of the largest employers of women and female individuals in the UK and Europe. And they are losing between 89 million to 129 million in productivity and performance losses as a result of their menopausal workforce. And we talk about menopausal workforce, think of any woman who's in her 40s and above. She is in that menopause transition. So the first thing you need to figure out, whether have a listening strategy, have a platform that helps you, not just static surveys, but something that helps. This is changing. Someone who's 41 may not be having any symptoms, or when she's 42 or 43, she's going to have symptoms, right? So it's a gradient. So the first thing is understanding what your menopause demographic is, and what that means is by age, by gender, by ethnicity. Hopefully after this session, you will know that, it's not just women in their 50s and 60s, it's women in the 40s and 30s and 20s as well. And you are actually being a progressive leader if you say, hey, I've got, let's say, 200 women who are in their 30s. And if we offer them the right support, the right education, then by the time they reach their 40s, they would have better services at their disposal. You as an organization can really look into the menopause transition workforce as a strategic talent imperative. when you're looking at your diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, or your environmental, social, and governance strategy. I mean, most of the employers that we are talking to who are open to considering technological innovations are those that have allocated billions of dollars to the social of the S of the ESG talent strategy. So how would you use it? Say you've got women, say you've got 10% of your talent in their 30s. How can you offer them the support, and also not just support for perimenopause that's coming in 5 or 6 years' time, but also how can you accelerate their promotion and development to get them to the board level? How do you increase that representation and use that golden period that they have? People like me are not going to stop anytime soon. I want to leave a world where women in the 20s and 30s are negotiating, not just on pregnancy and family benefits, but also on menopause benefits. Then we come to the topic of presenteeism and absenteeism. So presenteeism is when someone is present at work, but they're not able to give their 100%. Now, there could be creative ways. Firstly, you need to understand, right, who those people are, because what's happening in your workplace, and I hope some of you on this audience have probably experienced it through your team or firsthand, is when these hormones are fluctuating, your behavior starts changing, because these hormones are so important. They're not just chemicals. Of course, there are chemical reactions happening in your body, but you start feeling isolated, you start feeling dismissed, and the societal stigma around it, that you're growing old. Because think about it, when a woman is pregnant, it's something to be happy about, right? And probably most women have friends who are in the same age group, and they're getting pregnant all more or less at the same time. Now with perimenopause or menopause, it's very different, because your friend may not be going through what you are going through, your sister, your mom. So your usual support systems suddenly disappear, right? I get goosebumps every single time I say this. So, and when they disappear, you have nowhere to turn to. And where do we spend our most of the time? At the workplace, right? People that we work with. We also have a multi-generational workplace. So it's so important, I've got a client who's literally, when we do large scale transformations and project go lives, we all create posters, right? Or whatever you do nowadays in your organization. They are printing "No woman wants to be called menopausal" and hanging across their entire building. Why not? Right? It needs to be front and center, because it's not a woman problem. It's a societal problem. If you are a man and if you have a partner, you are also at the receiving end. If you are a line manager, no, it is your problem, because, making sure that your people are actually feeling supported is important. And it's not just words. So from my perspective, there should be key performance indicators and OKRs for managers to show how many women how many women who are in the menopause transition have you retained, developed, and progressed? How many of your team members who have left the organization were in that, in the menopause transition, and things of that nature? So there is an economic strategy that you can have to make sure that these women don't leave your organization, and they're actually celebrated and nurtured for what they bring to the table. Someone had raised their hand. I can't see who. I think it was Rosetta.
Rosetta, if you can type in the chat or in the Q&A, I will raise your question. There's been some comments, Jyoti, about individuals having, it was an accident, never mind. Individuals having an experience where their boss said, if you're going through menopause and you can't do your job, you should quit. And we were talking about, well, why is this so taboo? Why aren't we talking about it? And, from my perspective, I will say that it's an indication of being old, or at least that's how I feel. Yeah. And, I don't want my team, my employees to say, my leader's old. She can't remember anything. There she goes. She's having a hot flash again. It's that there is still very much a stigma around it. So it's not really a question. I'm just sort of commenting because people are talking about, we're expected to just deal with it and not let it affect us, or we're hiding it. Now, others have said in the chat, no, I said, you know, I'm having a hot flash, I'm taking my jacket off, I'm putting it back on, I'm taking it off, putting it back on.
Yeah.
So it's, we also personally have to overcome the stigma too, and the embarrassment.
Yeah, sure. And you know, there is menopause has a body. It's called andropause. So men have hormones too, and they have just less hormones than women, but they go through andropause as well. So sure, when a man is going through andropause, we should ask them to quit as well, right? So I think so organizations, Christine, really are in front to take that charge and take the lead and say, just because someone's going through menopause, we are not going to say just quit. We need to understand. And what do I mean when I say understand, right? When you have solutions, it's not about just giving somebody a hormone patch, which most of our healthcare providers are doing, or giving people hormone testing kits, which researchers know that don't give you anything about the fluctuating hormones during menopause. It's about giving them personalized support in the sense, okay, so someone, for example, what are you drinking? What are you eating? Science tells us that if what you get put into your body, essentially what's happening is your body had more elasticity to take and tolerate if you put crap into your body. As you age, because those hormones are fluctuating, that elasticity is reducing, which essentially means then you need to make modifications. Like for example, I cannot drink a glass of wine without having a headache. So I either have to be ready for it now, but we know the science. So for example, on our platform, we tell women that, look, it's histamine intolerance because estrogen breaks down histamine. So it's having that information. And honestly, whether it's men or women in the audience, guys, it's so important to have that because your health practitioner does not. Your medical practitioner does not. They are just interested in giving you a hormone. I know so many people who just modified their lifestyle, and for workplaces, stress, cortisol, which is a stress hormone, that's like, it's linked, it's at the center of all other hormones that we are talking about here. So workplaces need to, you need to see how your role needs to change. Great example, whoever said you're taking on and taking off your jacket, your attire, your office attire that you wear, especially if there are people who are in the front line, you're sweating too much. And so those flexibilities should be there, even wearing heels and those sorts of things. I mean, every organization and every individual who takes a stand, know that you're not alone. You're taking a stand for 1,000 other people who are just waiting for someone to take a stand so they can follow through. I'm seeing all the hearts and all the claps. So thank you so much, guys. We appreciate that. All right. So progressing now, let's talk a little bit about the menopause demographic. I think this is something very, very important. And you see that I haven't started with women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, because I want all of us to understand that we need to think about this as a healthy aging spectrum in women and female individuals. So, because women in their 20s and 30s are not thinking about menopause. But if you look at that continuum, you are in premenopause, right? That's 20s, 30s, and 40s if you haven't really, have any symptoms, etc. And then you've got something called as premature menopause, which is when it happens in women who are younger than 40 years. And if it happens between 40 and 45, that is, excuse me, early menopause. Now, why am I bringing this and why am I starting with this? I'm starting with this is because premature ovarian insufficiency, there at least last year, the percentage was 3%. This year, it's 4%. Every year, the percentage of younger women who are being diagnosed with premature ovarian insufficiency is increasing. There are a number of factors. We as medical research or scientific research, we don't understand why POI happens. But what we do understand is the range of factors that have historically been associated with women who are diagnosed with premature menopause. They are reproductive disorders. So think about, we are Every day we are talking about, polycystic ovarian syndrome or PCOS, premenstrual dysphoric disorder or PMDD, endometriosis. Any woman, any young girl who has any of these conditions, science already knows that your path is almost predetermined. Now, knowing that if you have had these conditions, your menopause transition is going to be a bit more difficult, could be a bit more difficult than other women, is important for the medication you're taking, for example, is important for, say, the decisions you're making, like, if you want to start a family, when should you start a family? Because no one's really thinking, but there are women who are at the risk of POI. If you want a family, you start early, right? I'm working with an oncologist in the UK where he tells me 50% of his patients are women in their 20s, cancer patients. And if you're going through cancer therapy, I'm still to meet a patient whose doctor actually told them that when you go through radiation therapy, it affects your ovaries and you will have what is called as medically induced menopause. Girls who are born with autoimmune disorders like Turner syndrome, which is an X chromosome related disorder, they will have, we know they have POI. We already know it. You don't need a doctor to tell you that, right? But it's this scientific information that needs to be really shared with people. And then we come to the perimenopause, which is natural, which is, women in their, could be women in their 30s. I know most women of color that I have interviewed, when they started to understand the science through our research, said, oh my God, I've been having it since 36 or 37. And I can tell you what all of this started, I think when COVID happened, 2019, yeah. I had just had my 40th birthday in 2020, and I suddenly realized a dip in my energy levels. And I'm normally a very high energy person. And it was a combination of the COVID vaccine and reactions and everything, which led me to a very convoluted path of research. And here I am 4 years later talking about menopause transition and, trying to create evidence. So hopefully you can see, I don't know if there are any questions, that it's not just women in 50s and 60s, but women of all ages that are important. Let's progress. What I have in the next 2 slides, guys, and if you're driving, please don't try to read it. I'll read it out to you. But this is from our research, women talking across various countries on their lived experience of all stages of menopause in the workplace. I'll just read a couple. So there's one from a woman in the UK who was 37, 38, and she said, I've experienced very bad primary healthcare treatment when suggesting early menopause as a possible diagnosis. Mind you, she would have arrived at that diagnosis through her research, yeah? No one told her in the healthcare system. For a sudden change in my health over the past 18 months, early menopause is in my maternal line, which is, her mom had menopause. And she said, I somehow feel excluded because people think I don't belong there. And there are thousands of women who are in that situation. There's another one who says, from the US, who says, you are viewed, and, Christine, this brings up one of the points you were making earlier about being labeled as old. And, she said, you're viewed as a shirker and time waster. Other employees view you as a skiver, lazy, not concentrating, too emotional, and tend to bully you, making your life more of a misery than it already is. And, that compassion, that empathy is needed. And how does empathy come? Through understanding. And how does understanding come? Through scientific evidence. So it's a very simple step process that organizations need to follow. There's another one that I want to bring up is this 55-year-old in the UK said one of the final straws was being referred to as bloody knackered menopausal woman in front of an office of peers. These are real experiences, and I have hundreds of these, and so when we talk about the neuroscience of language, when we talk about the transformational leadership, you want to do transformational leadership, you've got a challenge right in front of you. Go practice your empathy and your compassion through how you treat your women who are going through menopausal transition, no matter what their age, ethnicity, or sex is. Let me just pause it and see if there are any questions. And I think we are
Yeah,
almost
Jyoti,
there.
I'm going to bundle something together a little bit here because we did have an individual who's male, and he tries to talk to employees at work, sensing something's wrong. But it's kind of hard. They're not like, it may not be a culture or an opportunity you're comfortable opening up about menopause or whatever else it actually might be. And I think we also, someone earlier had said, our techs are stressed out, must be some male techs, because their wives are experiencing menopause and they don't know what to do. So in reality, I mean, you could think about males within the organization, or an organization whose leadership is male dominated. And so like, how do you have these conversations? And one of the things I would say is you need to focus on training. You know, there's nothing wrong with having employee resource groups that focus on this topic, and inviting males and females to join the conversation. Quite honestly, it's training, it's feeling comfortable about having those conversations in an organization. Is there anything that you would add to that, Jyoti?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that actually takes us to the next question. I think next topic is there are organizations who are appointing what are known as menopause advisors or menopause champions. And there's a lot of training. I mean, these could be external people who come into your organization and train a bunch of men and women in how to have these conversations. That's one. I think the second, employee resource groups, that's where most organizations who are, shifting the needle a little bit, that's where they start. I think male, and it is important that it's not only for females. You have to have males and females in those sessions. And, I've seen some trainers say, oh, no, it's not for men. I'm like, there's a lot of unconscious bias as well, right? Why should men listen to this? Or women maybe, or it's quite possible that women may be uncomfortable talking about it. And then what you can do is you can have distinctive topics. You could have more peripheral topics that a male line manager is would be more interested in to have the conversation. But again, if you are a male who has a female partner and you want to help her, then I'll just bring this up there. Our platform Mimosa, actually we are in beta now, but we are going to release something called a safe space where you can actually ask questions, and it's science-backed information that it gives it back to you. Because you could be a male line manager who gets to know that one of their team members is suicidal. That's serious. Yeah, that's a serious problem. So those are some of the things that you could do. And that quickly, looking at time, brings us to, we are working currently on something that we are calling as a menopause intelligence maturity framework. Now you see here, we have a number of organizations that are working with us. So anyone on this session, if you're interested, just send me an email and we can have a chat with you. Where most organizations are is where you see the minimalist, where you see menopause as a tick box item. You want to be called menopause friendly, and there's nothing wrong with it. I think what's important is when you are looking at the returns on that investment, it cannot be in silos. So it cannot be just a static, oh, I've trained 500 managers and now I'm done. Well, what happened after that training? If there isn't any positive impact of that training in how your managers are treating their female team members or the support they're giving, then it's of no use, right? Then there are organizations who go one step further and they look at some of the symptom tracker apps. As I've mentioned, firstly, there is a misleading narrative that there is a defined list of symptoms. I think many of you who've been on Google or anywhere, some say 48, some say 61. The fact of the matter is there is an infinite list of symptoms. And I'll give you a very quick example. So say digestive issues, right? Digestive issues could be constipation for one, diarrhea for another one, and abdominal cramps for another one. So unless you are disintegrating these symptoms, you're not actually looking at the root cause of the problem. So what we are working on is when you look at, let's say, a Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 company, looking at their workforce, where that workforce will be in the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years time, that's how we then use to shape what their menopause education, enablement, and empowerment strategy looks like, and then provide tech platforms and innovations for that. So when you are able to take that first step and go on that journey of transforming from menopause, being menopause friendly to menopause intelligent, and having clear ROI. And that ROI would be individual career growth and progression, reduction in your attrition, increase in your retention. You are still hiring women in their 40s and not saying, oh, they are just menopausal, so we're not going to hire anybody who's in their 40s or 50s. And then as an organization, you need to see how they are then contributing to their growth. Because trust me, even though in a hybrid workforce, the junior people who are there, they have to look up to these senior people, because the COVID generation actually does not know much about workplace loyalty. They started on Zoom and they're working on Zoom. So it's important to have those people around. And the benefits are improved employee retention engagement, increase in productivity, better employee health. Now, how are we doing on time, Christine? Do I have 2 more minutes? Because you've been asking questions, but do I have 2 minutes or 3 minutes?
You have 2 minutes, and then I'll add one last question because I know it's going to be answered in your next slide.
Fabulous. Okay. So our last bit of the session is, how and where do you begin being menopause intelligent? And, Christine has asked some of those questions. So again, as I've mentioned, appointing a menopause champion or a specialist, important to know that it's not just static information that they are providing, and having that continuity even after you've done that training. Drafting a policy, which is not a cookie cutter approach, but something that you've actually first listened to your people. And again, keep in mind those individual differences I talked about in people's varying experiences. Reassessing your employee benefits. It's a fantastic opportunity for you to reevaluate your benefits that you give to your female workforce. As I say, with the work I am doing and the teams and the organizations we are working with, we are leading and shaping the future of female work, not just future of work. It has to be the future of female work and contextual to them. And then adapt your workplace environment to support women, and also evaluate your hiring practices, as I mentioned. So the key takeaways, number 1, you're never too young to be in menopause. So just remove that label of old and ageist out from your vocabulary. Number 2, menopause is not just hot flushes and night sweats. It's very important because there are women who are feeling excluded because hot flushes and night sweats is not experienced by all the women. Transition to menopause is not a uniform experience, so any support, any interventions you do needs to be individualized. Premature, early, and surgical menopause, as I mentioned, it can be a thunderbolt, not a gradual transition. So you need to keep your finger on the pulse there. Every expression of menopause counts, and you have to demonstrate in your action that you see every single female that's in your organization. And then employers need to meet their female population where they are in their unique menopause transition. With that, I will close my talk. Those are my contact details, and you can find other resources. And I think in the resources, we are also giving complimentary access to Mimosa, which is our platform. So the first 500 people, you have access until, I think, November 12th. To try out the platform. If you have questions, please feel you can find me through my details. I love those claps and hearts.
And clapping, Jyoti, that was amazing.
So amazing.
I will reiterate, we had a couple of questions on what are some of the benefits we should be offering within our organization? How do we make inroads to support within our organization? What should a company offer? So we gave a few examples in there in terms of menopause champions, doing training, employee resource groups. There's another resource attached as well about health coaching. We included some information on WebMD's health coaching because we do coach on women's hormonal health, which includes menopause, and really unpacking. It may not just be menopause, and it's really important to look at an individual personally and holistically. So all of that is available to you under the resources. Is there anything else, Jyoti, that you would add in terms of benefits to call out?
No, I think that sort of summarizes it well. Some people have asked, the resources there, you can get access to Mimosa. I think somebody had asked a question on progesterone benefits and side effects. One of the resource links you got is a link to our Menopause Science YouTube channel, where I'm actually talking to somebody about those benefits. But again, it has to be validated with your, it's educational. It has to be validated with your healthcare provider. And then we work to create tailored programs for your menopause transition. So if you have questions, I'm very happy to spend my 30 minutes, no charge, and have a chat with you, because we want to make sure this is not just a one-off session for me, guys. You know what, I'm working day and night on this. So if I can help with a follow-up call, if Christine can help with a follow-up call, whatever you need, you've taken the first step in attending a session like this, and we hope that you will continue in action in what you've learned today.
And I will add that join us for part 2 of this Menopause in the Workplace series, which is next week. We are going to be looking at experiences from different employee perspectives. We will have a male on our panel and really insightful information there to share. We'll also provide recommendation options for empowering both employers and employees to prepare for the menopause journey as well. So I think we have like 2 minutes left. I'm just scanning to see. I know there've been so much conversation and chat. It's almost like we'll take all of you, we'll create a big community, and we can take this offline and continue the conversation. But people are doing trainings. It is well received. It's almost like we just have to open up the door and start the conversation, and we will be surprised how many people will participate. What prompted this webinar, quite honestly, was we posted a blog on the topic, and many of our own employees at WebMD went to HR and said, we want to learn more. We're so glad that you brought up this topic. So sometimes it's just a matter of really having that conversation. I'm looking at my list here. Is there anything else? People are just very thankful, Jyoti, for everything that you've added today. Great session. So, well, then with that, Jyoti, thank you so much. Such insightful information. It was a pleasure working with you. And Franny, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you all for joining us. I want to thank Jyoti and also Christine for their insight and this wonderful conversation that all of you audience participated in, and you did such an amazing job with comments, questions, and stories. We appreciate you. And as Christine said, please join us on November 1st for part 2 of this series, and check out hrexchangenetwork.com. Stay tuned for all of the relevant information that you can find there, including an article about menopause in the workplace that was posted today. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.